Hello and welcome to the Business Pulse podcast with me, Daniel McConnell.
And me, Peter O'Dwyer.
Now, we haven't had a huge number of politicians on this podcast. I think we've had the Taoiseach, which Daniel Murray, our colleague, our policy editor, managed to track down in Cambridge. But today's guest is someone who I've been very keen to interview for a while, given his role both as Energy Minister and as Transport Minister, because he's at that cross-section of an area that is of huge focus for us, which is infrastructure and the growth of the country and the next steps, etc. like that. So Darragh O'Brien, who is the, as I call him, the pugnacious bruiser from Malahide.
I think he liked that.
He did, yeah. But, you know, someone who has, I think, had to weather a fair bit of criticism given his perceived failure in housing over the kind of the failure to deliver 40,000 houses in the year of an election. But someone who has gone into transport and had a couple of controversies he's had to deal with, be Dublin Airport and the Kenny Jacobs affair, which we wrote up quite a bit about. But I thought for me it was interesting to kind of hear him describe life as a minister, being in control or not of a department, the system, fighting the system at some point. Again, Peter, I don't know what you listened to it, so what did you think?
Yeah, I think people will really enjoy this interview. I think from the off, sometimes people have to warm up a little bit. Yeah. From the off, it was straight into the inner workings of government, how a minister does or sometimes doesn't do their job or struggles to do their job. Yeah. Because, like he says at one point, and you know, the civil servants are supposed to work for me too. Long pause. And they do. And it was this kind of stuff of, you know, where he runs into issues. He describes, you know, going into a new department that you have to get down to work immediately. And my priorities might be my predecessor's priorities. It's a really good insight into the nuts and bolts of how you do government and how you're a minister.
But then also pressing him about, you know, how to actually move things forward. Like, I mean, like, and he kind of reveals that, like, the permanent government or the civil service are not averse to kind of playing games or, you know, using tricks or devices to slow things down, even when a government decision has been taken. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think at one point we'll hear in the interview, he uses a phrase like, and at some point you find a decision government has been made has been unpicked, I think is the word. And on one level, that's not surprising, and another level, it's shocking, if you know what I mean. You know, if a government, if the elected officials, elected politicians make a decision, it's for the officials to implement it. Yeah. If you were putting faith in, and like he's got two departments as well, if you were putting faith in, I've made the decision, we've set the roadmap, now I'm going to check in it whenever, and you come back and you find that actually it's being undermined.
Because of a lack of paper clips here, we haven't been able to move forward. Like,
getting secondhand annoyed, you know, on his behalf. And they get it in the neck because they're the elected politicians, and they're going to continue to get it in the neck from us and others, and from the public more importantly. But you would have a certain degree of sympathy for if they're getting in the neck because of what they have agreed and set out not being enacted sometimes. I mean, that's a pretty tough place to be in.
And I mean, the other big elephant in the room, as I said, I left it to the end of the interview to ask him about it, but like, he clearly has leadership ambitions. Now, he's not going to push Micheál Martin under a bus. Yeah. And he talked a lot about having a good working relationship and blah, 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 and the usual kind of stuff. But, you know, kind of the last question, you know, there's lots of people in your party who would want a dub leader. Well, I'm a dub too. So there's a sense in that. Like, so
put two and two together.
You know, so, and I think, you know, for him, he is just trying to make sure that he can show some real success and progress in the two areas, because I think when we did get into it a little bit in terms of the policy stuff, you know, delays in the energy stuff because of planning, there's delays in the transport area again because of planning. And I think one of the most shocking revelations, he said, because of the spending code, because of the state's own steps that they have to put, you know, to get funding approval, it added an extra 100 million onto the cost of it. Like, I was just like, here, like.
Well, I was listening to that in the context of yet another bike shed controversy. Yeah. And I too think that is too much money for a bike shed. Yeah. So don't get me wrong. But when the country can be in convulsions over the very expensive bike sheds that we seem to have to build, and then something like 100 million just because you go to stage gate one of a process, like that doesn't even really get covered, or it would, I suppose, if it was out in the public domain. But yeah, I mean, the scale we're talking about there is so much more than some of these projects that get all the
money. This is like imagine, now, there will probably always be an element of waste in a bureaucracy. There will always be an element of waste, you know, in terms of mega projects or whatever like that. But if that's the norm, and he seemed to suggest that this is more frequent than kind of the exception, like that is galling. And he said himself, he didn't really have an answer for it. Like he kind of said it's frustrating and kind of for him. I thought, you know, on the transport stuff, he like on Metro and all the rest of it, you kind of think that this government finally gets it in terms of what needs to happen. The big question mark is whether or not they actually have the balls, to put it frankly, to kind of get it done.
I think they get it, but will they get it done?
Yeah.
That's the kind of space that we're in at the moment. Like even in the newsroom, we were talking about a conference that's coming up soon and talking to the reporters about it was all this kind of infrastructure stuff. And I'm like, now the questions are we starting to see it yet? Because we've had the discussion about what's wrong.
Yeah.
We've had the policy direction of what needs to change. We've had some of the changes enacted. But is it actually starting to be seen yet?
Yeah.
And they're going to have to show some progress in that regard pretty soon. Like their time in government will come and go quickly as it always does. Yeah. And what will they have to show for it?
Very good. Well, listen, here now is our interview with Darragh O'Brien. It's well worth a watch or a listen, and we'll be back to you for the post-match analysis after this. Darragh O'Brien, you're very welcome to the Business Stuff podcast. Thank you very much for doing it. You're a busy man. Mm-hmm. Talk to me at the start, being a minister. What's your day like?
There's no one day is like the other, okay? And I suppose particularly with this portfolio, because I have two ministries.
Yeah.
And one of the things is trying to actually balance your time between both portfolios, because you have two of everything. Sounds like an obvious
statement. Generals,
two sec gens, two management teams, two sets of oral questions, so you're up every 3 weeks, two budget negotiations, etc., etc., etc. But look, it's great to be there. I love doing it, okay? And I really enjoyed housing. There was quite a bit, you've a lot of transferable skills from one to the other. Like once you get to know how the system itself works, or in some instances doesn't work, that you can see around corners as best you can. So I think the longer you're in it, certainly the experience I had in housing stands to me even from an organisational perspective.
Okay. But talk to me then about like you say no day's ever the same, but I mean, do they tend to be up early in the morning, working late at night?
Yeah.
And I suppose the real question I'm trying to get to, are you as minister really in charge or in control of your department?
Yeah, answer your first one, like basically what I tried to do is, you be up early and you work late, okay? And that's a norm for everyone. Try to split it as best I can between, if the 3 sitting days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, will always be in Leinster House. Yeah. The Monday, Friday, Saturday, I'll be between departments and the constituency. So if I can, you still need to stay connected to your constituency, so you can be doing departmental work in the constituency. I have a little cubby hole upstairs in the house that I use as an office. So you might do a couple of VCs to start off your Monday, your planning, your diary meetings, that type of thing. And that's the one thing you find is that you're wishing your life away nearly, because you've stuff going into your diary months and months and months ahead.
Yeah, okay.
It is trying to manage that, and you don't want to be, for want of a better phrase, a busy fool either. I think what I certainly find is trying to focus on the priority areas. You cannot do everything. So to answer your question, like, are you in control? Yes, but you have to make sure you're in control. And what I mean by that is that means being in the weeds, particularly around your priority areas. So it means not just from your sec gen, assistant secretary, and your heads of teams, POs, finding out who's doing what, but actually driving that agenda. And that takes a while to get there, to be frank. There's like, I've good teams. I have to say, colleagues in there, in the main, very, very good. Yeah. You have to, at the start, point them towards the programme for government. Okay, so when I come in first to both departments, here's the government's priorities. Because there can be lots of other work that has been underway on other things that may have been predecessors' priorities that aren't mine. Okay? And you have to be pretty direct about that. Collegiate, yes, I like to work with people.
Yeah.
And that is the one thing it does. It's like turning a ship. You do actually have to do a lot of that type of work at the start.
Yeah. Because I always invite, and again, given my time in Leinster House and my experience with ministers, and I remember Michael Noonan saying it to me as well when he went into finance, was, no, I kind of laid down the law early with my officials as to when I want my diary full or free to allow me be in control.
You got to do that.
So it's more about, are you in control of the bounce of the ball? Or are you know what I mean? Because I can understand from, say, even reading Owen Murphy's book about how the game can almost run away from you.
It can if you let it. And I'm not saying sometimes it does, if I'm being very honest. You also have to be, look, you try to be proactive around policy and what you want to get done, but then events happen. Okay, so obviously the size of proportion of my time is now spent on energy, and specifically on affordability. I'm sure we'll get to that later. So you have to be able to allow yourself the flex to be able to deal with things, and prioritization is critical, because you could be trying to do 100 different things. So a couple of things we do there is, you got to set down your agenda. Here's the priority things. to be fair, you got to work with your ministers of state. So
And delegate?
Yeah, delegate and trust them, right? But, and I do delegate. I think anyone who's worked with me, you have to delegate. There's enough work to go around for everybody. And I'm not really that interested in saying because there's a fund out here on such and such that I want to see everything that comes up the line on every announcement. I like to work with colleagues who are there. And that works out well. I think the Minister of State want a bit of freedom too. But it is about prioritisation. It's about managing your work. But I also think, a couple of weeks ago, I got my own team, so my own special advisors, plus my constituency team. We got off-site, just got a hotel meeting room and sat down and kind of assess where we're at, how they're getting on with stuff, and then trying to plan ahead. And that's critical. So you're not just responding all the time. So how are we getting on with our priorities? What are we doing? What's our mission here? Do you know what I mean?
Because again, I suppose to kind of reveal, you have your team that works to you, and then you have the civil service who probably
supposed to work for
you, exactly. But
and they do.
But I'm thinking of the like we all grew up on, those of us who are into politics, we would have grown up on Yes Minister. We would have seen the sort of the games that can be played, and we all know how the system itself. And I mean, your own government, I suppose, has acknowledged that the system can slow everything down, can be bureaucratic, can be. I mean, talk to me about those tensions and when they arise. How do you just manage? How do you make things move forward if you're meeting that sort of institutional resistance?
Well, I think first you got to respect the institutions and you got to respect the people who work within the departments. That's the first thing, because if you don't, you cannot come in and start banging the table. Yeah. And that's not my style, and I don't do that.
The Darragh gets it done.
Well, Darragh gets it done. Yeah, Darragh gets it done. Yeah, it's pretty good. I might use that in the next election. But no, you do. And look, you can test people. And I think, to be fair, look, first thing is you getting them on board. Can the system slow it down? And that's just within the people you're working with know. Yes, it can. But again, I think really it's about knowing where your policy implementation on things, where that's at. And it does require a lot of your time. A lot of your own time in seeing what's happening, in reading, in engaging, because, I think the system's generally risk averse. That's not a criticism. It's just a reality.
Well, it would be for me. I think it's too risk averse.
Yeah. Well, you can say that, and I don't. And I think, in fairness, in some areas it's too risk averse. I'd agree with you. Okay, and really, and in some areas I found where decisions that government have been made are not quite being unpicked, but are being questioned. Then, and that is a frustration. And that's not necessarily within my own two departments, but other sister departments that you'd be dealing with. Okay, sometimes my own, if I'm frank, and I think there has to be an understanding that where government make a decision, they're elected to do it. They're elected by the people to do it. And it's about implementing that decision. Now, it's right that you're tested, to be frank. And I think that's a good thing, that ministers are tested by, to a degree in relation to, initiatives that would be brought forward. Are they well costed?
How does that testing manifest itself? Is it around numbers? Is it around budgets? Is it around the policy? Or is it complicity or, compliance with Europe? What are the games that go on?
Kind of all of the above. But look, I sit down with management board with both departments every month. Yeah. Okay, so you've got all your senior people basically in each of the departments. You sit down and you work through what work is at hand and how is that moving. And you will find through those meetings and elsewhere, some things have slipped off the agenda, some things are delayed. There can be valid reasons for that. It can be a notification with Europe, it can be whatever. But it's about making sure as best as possible that you're keeping things on track. I think as well, I came from a heavy delivery department. Some might argue that's not the case, but if I look at on housing, some of the big chunks of heavy legislation we would have done around Affordable Housing Act, LDA Act, all of those various things that we did, obviously the Planning and Development Act. Yeah. So we're heavily involved in legislation. When you come into a new department, which I'm in, let's say in transport and in climate, energy and environment, they may not have been used to doing that level of legislation. And when you're trying to bring forward a reform agenda, you have to resource them and you have to get them used to doing that. And I think, to be very fair, in the main, that's responded to. Yeah. But do you find things from time to time that aren't done that should have been? Yes, you do. Okay. I find that out. But that's why your advisors are important too.
Because they're your eyes and ears.
They're the eyes and ears. But they also, to be fair, have to act as a bridge between the political and the institutional. And that has to be a respectful relationship as well. Because don't forget, you're going to be working with these people for 5 years. There are many incredibly committed people, all right, within the system who will work 24/7 to get stuff done. I think there's some structural reform, though, that's needed within it, if I'm frank. We lose a lot of expertise because of this generalist approach. So what that is basically, if someone wants to get promoted, they go forward for a promotion. They might be the best person in a particular field on climate, for argument's sake. They're going from an assistant principal officer to a principal officer, or even lower down the chain, and they have to move to a section that they may not have had any dealings with before. And I think in Ireland...
And even communications, because I often see...
It's nuts.
Like, you cannot get promoted if your background is communication. You need a policy win.
Yeah.
And there probably is wisdom of that, but I think that's a very...
Some wisdom in it, but not like this was copied effectively from the British civil service, which is a massive beast, which is bigger than Ireland's, right? So, I won't talk about specifics, but I have examples where I had really excellent both policy and implementation people in particular areas that then go for a promotion and are moved to something that's completely alien to them, and then also means that you're losing that resource and that knowledge, right? But I suppose, look, you want people to get on, you want people to move forward. Yes, the skills are transferable and transversal, and that's good. But I think particularly, look, if I take on two departments that I have, which are relatively big spenders but big delivery, let's say on transport, will be big capital projects that are starting now.
Yeah.
You need to have the people who have the expertise to deliver them, who have the relationships with the agencies. And the other thing in Ireland, frankly, we have too many agencies.
Okay.
Like that's one thing I find. And it's not a criticism of the people who are doing the work within it. But if I look at, the number of different agencies that we have.
So the state almost getting in its own way?
It does from time to time. It does. Now we're working very hard to change that. And I think it is changing. I think the Planning Act that I brought forward will change it. I think that the critical infrastructure bill that Jack's working on absolutely will. And I think some of our own systems, particularly in relation to public spending code, and I don't want to rip up the public spending code, but like an example of one motorway in the southwest, that when I went to gate 1, which is basically your first approval, to get through to the final approval, the cost of that project is going up by over 100 million. Yeah. Now I have to find that 100 million to do it, and it is going to be done. But the reason for that cost increase is because of the timing delay. And I know that's something that is being changed now as well, to try to remove some of those steps, because it does
to an outsider, that sort of talk is just...
It's bonkers.
It's infuriating.
Yeah,
absolutely infuriating.
For an insider, if you want to go, it's infuriating too.
What has been your most challenging moment? And we'll get into housing in maybe in deeper detail shortly, but what has been your most frustrating moment as a minister?
That's a really good question. Don't get frustrated easily. To be frank, I don't. I think your first few months in getting a handle on where things are at, all right, that's a kind of a general answer, but it's true. It's actually those first few months when you want to really get moving from the start is actually just to, find out where things are at, setting your priorities forward. And I suppose the general frustration sometimes is speed of delivery. Like timelines are set. In the main, they're met, but then in a sizable portion, they're not. And that's my biggest frustration, if I'm being honest, where a timeline is set and then it is, like, I'll be frank with you, the Celtic interconnector. Okay, there are reasons for that, but that's been delayed again. That's a great frustration for me. It's a critical piece of energy
We've been talking about it for God knows how long.
And it's being built right now, and yes, that's good, and all and I appreciate the work that's been done here up to now. But then, for another 6 months delay to the project, for something as critical as that as our first, interconnection to continental Europe, and energy is where it's at because we do nothing without energy. That's an example of a frustration. Not so much that it is frustrating that it happened, but when you find out that it's delayed, and that's also sometimes the communication internally isn't as good as it should be. Now, I don't want to be focusing on a lot of the negative things. There are lots of good things that are happening, lots of good delivery. But if I'm frank about it, I think that in some instances, timelines that are set may not be, in some instances, may not be seen as absolute deadlines. You know what I mean? And that can frustrate me.
I've long held the view, having, I started in Leicester House in 2007. So I was a couple. So I was like your generation, Darragh O'Brien, Michael McGrath. Like we all started at the same time in Leicester House. So I was there through the end of Bertie into Brian Cowan's government. That collapse of government. That was, and the crash. It was horrific.
It was horrific for everyone.
But for me, the legacy, or one of the legacies, is that the permanent government became too powerful. Or that balance between the political class and the permanent government became out of sync. I think you guys are trying to redress that balance. But can you convince me that the civil service are not too powerful in this country, or do you think you guys can still run the table?
Yeah, I do still think we run the table, but it goes back to something I said at the very start. That's why you need to know everything that's going on.
Yeah.
Okay? Because it can be a very small step in a process can hold up a big project or can hold up a big, a policy implementation. To be fair, like in general, or the majority of times that I find the colleagues that I work with to be really on message, on the same page. And I don't necessarily think it's out of badness. I think it is down to that risk aversion and still that legacy, if I'm frank, from that period.
The scars are still there.
Yeah, they are still there. But government are elected to decide. Like I had a cabinet subcommittee there recently or after it where there was a particular policy that is important, a document that's important that it is issued, and we've been working on it for months. I concluded my work on it last October.
Okay.
Right? And then it comes in from another department with their comments on it and this type of thing. And I really did, in that instance, have to bang the table. I said, look, if that department wants to register as a political party, wants to stand for election and wants to be part of government, then they'll decide on policy.
Yeah.
So, to be fair, my Sec Gen in Transport, Ken Spratt, is a great guy. You won't mind me mentioning it on this. Is like he abides by is that politicians decide, civil servants abide.
Yeah.
And they live by that, to be fair.
So I think some do.
Yeah, I'm mentioning him, but that is something that some do all know.
Yeah. Let me be frank, right? I'm in a lot of rooms now. Having left Leinster House, I'm in rooms with business leaders all the time. A lot of Chatham House rules, but they are always saying delivery, and
totally.
They all point the finger of blame at the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform as a blocker. The Department of No, as it's colloquially known. And I'm not going to personalise it, but they think that the top brass in there are, a byproduct of the crash. Is it your experience that it is a Department of No and it is overly obstructive in getting the sort of things that need to get
I can understand why private sector may see it that way. I have to say, yeah, look, have I experienced that? Yes, I have. Okay. In the main, though, like I've concluded a NDP, National Development Plan, sort of allocations between now and 2030. My discussions with Jack and his officials were good. Okay.
But I think more of the criticism is laid at the officials as opposed to the
I get
leaders,
you. I get you. But I get you. But I think things like the public spending code needs to be reformed and is.
Okay.
That was a product of that department. It was far too restrictive, far too onerous, far too many steps in it. I can just speak from my experience now that mostly it's good, but we have to drive that. So if I look at, let's say, the Planning and Development Act, the reason we did that and time-bound it and basically reformed the whole system because we're tying ourselves up in knots, right? Effectively tying ourselves up in knots. And still, if I look at on the offshore wind side, I'm using this as an example, that I know that there'll be a number of those projects will come through planning this year and actually in Q3, which is good. We want to get them into construction. Unfortunately, though, I also know that there'll be one or two environmental groups who are going to challenge that.
Yeah.
Right? And now that's their right to do it.
But do you think it's right for the likes of Antashka to be blocking major infrastructure pieces? I don't think it's right. They are a recognised party within it, but no, I don't. And I think they need to take a broader view on it, particularly in the current climate. Like if I think about our whole decarbonisation agenda and removing our dependence and further reducing our dependence on fossil fuel, wind energy is critical to that. Offshore would be a game changer. Yeah,
we're doing really well onshore, but if you look at some of the groups who have actually objected to that and who will object, some of the groups are environmental groups. And the whole purpose of doing this is actually to reduce our dependence on fossil, become energy sovereign, that we're producing clean energy. To be fair, I meet the environmental pillar regularly. They're good people. I have a good relationship with them. But still, I can tell you that when I see some, like this is going before the courts, so be careful, but like we've the large energy user policy that's being challenged, all of these type of things. Now, what's good what the courts are doing is giving early hearing dates. Yeah. And that makes a big difference, okay? But I think groups, well-meaning and all that, need to look at the bigger picture, and I don't think they always do.
Talk to me about the difference between being a minister and, say, a backbench TD. Pascal Dunn, who sat in a podcast studio with me before, and he said it's a world of difference.
It's totally, it's completely different.
How does your day differ from being a TD where you're probably on a committee or you're a committee chair to being a minister?
Well, it's full tilt. Okay, you're in the glare completely. When I was a backbench TD, you could walk down the street in Cork, no one would have a clue who you are, right? If I go anywhere across the country, it's actually funny. You see people take a double take.
Yeah.
We were coming back from the north there last week and stopped in the garage to get a coffee as well. And there were a bunch of people who were coming back from a trip in Donegal, and they were off a bus and they were over talking to me and they knew who I was. So that first thing is that is different. Okay, so the public awareness of who you are and what you do is much, much broader. It's very different. And I think, look, it's good. It's good that people engage with you.
Yeah.
From a work perspective, it's completely different because you have to trust. Like thankfully, I have a really good constituency team. Denise and Paddy and Simon and Dave in there do a lot of the work. I keep an eye on that closely because they're the people who elect me, but you have to trust your team to be able to do a lot of the work because, frankly, if you're to do the job as a minister, and particularly my own, because I have 2 ministries, you have to give the majority of your time to that. And your time is not always your own. So that delegation I spoke about earlier on, but trust too, is critical.
And how long are those people with you? Are these people you've...
Well, Denise First-Sins has been with me since 2004.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So actually, since before I got elected to Fingal County Council, she started working with me and she runs the show. She's great. And then Patrick came to me as an intern actually out of DCU and for some crazy reason wanted to stay on, and he has. Yeah. He's from Offaly, Denise from Malahide, and then I have the 2 other guys. When I got the ministry, you get they'll assign a couple of additional resources to your team, and the lads are great. They get on well. But they're critically important because if I was like, I'm conscious I'm a national politician. It's great to be appointed to cabinet. The biggest difference, as your Pascal alluded to it, is you're right there at the table and making decisions. Yeah. Okay, and you do feel that responsibility, to be frank. Like I particularly remember COVID. Like some of the decisions we were making as a collective were really, really tough decisions, tough for people, but you know the decisions you're making have an impact. One thing that some may disagree has stood to me is that experience I had as a backbench TD, particularly 2008 to 2011. I had to take, as part of a government, really unpopular, terrible decisions that hurt people. I met people who were very angry about that. I lost my seat in 2011. I'd actually say probably one of the best things that happened to me.
I was actually going to get into that.
Yeah. It's just the experience. And Susan, my wife, wouldn't say that either but having said that, I think just from a learning perspective.
Did you ever think, not to interrupt there, but I mean, when you lost your seat and you went into the Seanad, and the Seanad was obviously, you used it as a platform to go back, it kept you in the national political space. But did you ever think, that's done, I'll find another career, I'll go off and do, or were you just...
No, I was 20 odd years in financial services before that, on the pension side. And in fairness, the company I worked with were very good, giving me a year's leave of absence unpaid to stand for elections. So 06 to 07, I basically worked, just full time at the campaign because I was only a councillor from 04. Yeah. And thankfully I got elected, and surprisingly to some, including Celtic bookmakers. I know they lost a lot of money. I didn't have a bet myself now, just to be clear on that. I know lots of people who did. PJ Mara and others who did. But leaving that aside, I didn't contemplate going back in. Like, I'd always wanted to do it. A specific interest in community history was something that was always, and I always kind of wanted to, politics was of great interest to me. Now, when you lose your seat, and I'm not looking for any violins, but it was like, being a former Fianna Fáil TD after that period was not really a great thing to have on your CV, to be frank. Yeah. The people, in fairness, when I canvassed that election, I didn't get hammered out the door. I lost by about 300 votes or so. A lot of people just said, look, Darragh, not this time. We're going through. And you got to respect that. Yeah. I didn't argue with anyone. I knew what was happening. And then thankfully in 16, my vote went up substantially. I got elected first count.
I've always felt sorry for those who've lost their Dáil seat, to then have to get stuck into a Seanad campaign to try and get elected.
Well, try be a dub who's no country cousins, okay? Because when I was appointed in the interregnum, okay, because actually some of a couple of Taoiseach's nominees were elected, so at least I had a vote, right? Yeah. But like, my family are like 5, 6, 7 generations, mom and dad side, all dubs. Okay. So I couldn't rock up to Inchiquin and Clare and say, by the way, my cousin lives down the road, or I've cousins in Ballina and Mayo. So you were very much leaning on, people that you may have known in a very short space of time. I think, to be fair to our councillors back then in our PP, because we got a good hiding, we're down to 21 seats. Yeah. The Brian Lenihan, God rest him, was the only
Dub
elected. I remember Brian speaking to me the day of the count saying, I think you'll get in. I think on this one he got his maths wrong because I could read it and say, I ain't getting in.
But no disrespect to Brian, I wrote a book on him. Yeah. He got his numbers wrong a few times.
Some say that, I know, we got this wrong too then. Okay, you won't mind us saying that. But yeah, I could read it. Anyway, but a lot of our councillors actually took a decision at that stage that they needed to have they particularly needed to have a Dublin focus, right? And I was very grateful to the guys. Now, it's a brutal campaign. The Shannon campaign,
because you're exhausted anyway.
You're wrecked. Sure. You're wrecked, and then you're out around the country, and it was
mobile
GPS, mobile phone, quite mobile phones, but not putting in your air codes and going around the country. So, I found myself outside Tullow in County Clare, or Tulla in County Clare, not Tullow and Carlow, Tulla in County Clare, on the way out to see Timmy Dooley at the time. And I remember one of the few times I saw where you see these deer crossing signs where you actually saw deer on the road, right? So I'm coming out like it was an experience. But what stood to me is a lot of the people I met through that, and when I got elected, particularly around our councillors and our grassroots, I got to know a lot of them and still stay in touch. I was up in Monaghan just late last week on Friday, coming back from Armagh, and PJ O'Hanlon, who's the Cahill there. I remember going to Monaghan. PJ didn't know me from Adam when I went up there, and I knew, to be fair, when he said he was going to vote for me, he did.
Okay,
and he was good. Now, in fairness, people always say with a Senate campaign, okay, whatever number you think you're going to get, divided by 2 and divided by 2 again, because very unfair phrase, but people say you're dealing with a bunch of professional liars. I think, to be fair, that they're not lying, right? But they know lots of people, and when they say they're voting for you, that might mean a number 3. Okay, so in that sense, it's really competitive. But I remember, like Sean Connick won't mind me mentioning, I'm sure. Like Sean was one of that new intake in 2007. He's doing really well now, thankfully. He ran for the Shannon, other former TDs in 2011. And didn't get elected.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember them being in Leicester House looking for the votes.
Yeah,
it's
brutal. It's brutal. Now, that's the profession we're in, right? It does stand to you. But getting back to it, I think from what I learned through that period, even in the Dáil, the 2009-10 period, and I was working pretty closely with Brian Lennon and myself and Michael McGrath, and actually we were sent out to bat. This again is a learning experience. I remember being on Pat Kenny, and it was kind of a couple of weeks before the election. I think, geez, this is great. The press guys said, listen, our own team, you should go out and do this. It's great for profile. Then I was thinking afterwards, why in God, I won't say why, what I really think, but so why in God's name am I here as a backbench TD and all of these ministers have done it? They're not, right?
So runner.
Yeah, they've pretty much, right? So then I learned that too, but it was a really interesting time post that and the rebuilding of the party and working with Micheál and working that way through, particularly up, no, not exclusively, but particularly up to 2016. It was like very policy focused.
Yeah.
Reworking that. The local elections in 14 were decent, 16, and then moving on from there. So it's been a fascinating time, a real busy time, but a fascinating time to be involved too.
Talk to me about your perception of the media and your portrayal in the media. Like, how do you think you're portrayed, or what's been your relationship with the media?
Well, Darragh gets it done thing. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah.
No, it's more than that. It's more just again, talk to some politicians who just generally say, I feckin' hate the media. You never give me a fair crack at a whip. I'm always caricatured as a certain one way or the other. No. And then some people say, no, it doesn't bother. It's water off a duck's back.
For me, genuinely, it's water off a duck's back. I actually think some of it's, the last one I read, I don't know what his business post, I think it was actually, was a pugnacious bruiser, right?
That was me, yeah.
Yeah, that was you. Yeah. Do you know what? I actually think that's fine, right? So I don't, I didn't know that was you, yeah. But like, in fairness, I'm not a shrinking violet, right? I do like debate and I will push back. I never want to be disrespectful either to political opponents or that. And I really try not to, and I think civility within discourse is important. But yeah, I'll fight my corner, and I'll stand, and I'll also call things out that I think are incorrect, and sometimes I might be seen to be a bit too forceful, but I don't mind that. And no, really, like I don't really like Oliver Callan stuff and all that. I think it's funny. He can't get the accent, right? So I think he just can't figure it out, I honestly don't mind that. I think sometimes you get very critical articles.
Yeah.
But look, I've said this, and hopefully, Danny, you'll know this as well, is that I've always respected the media, the job that they have to do. And in the main, it balances out. Like, there are things from time to time you say, would be it on RTE or whatever, you say, like, why did they cover this slant or the other?
Yeah.
But in the main, that balances out. And I think we've all, Leinster House is kind of, you've been there for a long time. it's not that media and politicians don't work hand in glove, but they've specific jobs to do and being held to account. Like, I do call guys out. Like, if I see something that's wrong, either myself or Siobhan, like, I will actually, not ring up and give out yards, but say, by the way, and
you're not right there.
You're not right in this. And to be fair, 9 times out of 10, you'll see that corrected.
Yeah. My good friend and colleague John Lee always gave me the adage of being a political reporter. He says the only job you can go and kick a politician straight in the goalies and they have to come back and talk to you 3 weeks later.
You don't have to come back and talk to them.
But they mostly do.
They mostly do because, like, to be fair, like, if you're in politics and you can't take a good kicking, you shouldn't be in it.
Yeah.
Like, let's be straight about it. And you don't have to agree with everything. Do I think sometimes that, some of the reporting, I might think personally that might be unfair or it's not balanced? That doesn't happen too often.
Okay.
And I think there are certain publications people think they'll have a certain slant. And I think that too. But I think more than ever now, like, we've an opportunity. Like, I talk, directly to the people who elect me a lot. And I think media, and that's been out and about or been through my own channels and social media. But to be fair to media, and like, I've been on, be it News Talk with Claire Byrne or RTE or Morning Ireland, they give you a good going over, but rightly so.
Yeah.
But it's up to you to be able to try to get your points across as well. And I don't really have a problem with it. I don't, to be frank.
Do you think it's fair for people to say you were a failure in housing?
Do I think it's
fair for people to? Because ultimately there's that perception that you were promising 40,000 in the last year and it was less than that.
No, I don't think it's fair. I think particularly with that projection of 40,000, I wasn't the only one projecting it. When I look back at what we did, or even at the time, we did get it moving.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time trying to build momentum and confidence building out on the ground. One of the things I do in my own job, you were asking a while ago about, my daily, like what's my daily schedule. Like, I try to spend a lot of time out of the office, meeting the people who are delivering. I think if you talk to most people in the sector, we were able to, both in social, affordable, private housing, is really build momentum. I dealt with the local authorities respectfully. I met them many, many times to get them moving. So, like, would I have liked to have done more? Yes, but we delivered 135,000 new homes, and a big priority for me was to get affordable housing up and running. Like, the First Home scheme is a game changer for thousands of people, and there was a lot of pushback in the system on that.
Why?
Again, some of that risk aversion, didn't like it, thought it was wasn't done before.
Okay.
And I believed it. And I know now there are literally thousands of households who've been able to buy their own, literally thousands, who've bought their own home because of that change. I wanted to legislate for affordable housing, which I did. I came in, the Land Development Agency had no money, had no homes, right? There was no cost rental. There's 6,000 cost rental units now. So I'm quite happy with people to say, do you know what, Darragh, you got that projection wrong of 40,000, all right? That's fine, and that's legitimate criticism, okay? But I think if you look at the other elements, and many do, of what we actually delivered, LDA affordable, planning reform as well, those really seeing it, getting social housing up to a level that we hadn't seen ever, actually, frankly, and tooling them to do it. And I was singularly focused on getting it moving. And I'm quite happy that I got it moving.
But you accept that look, people can rightly be cynical around politics about lies being told. I'm not saying you lied or anybody like it, but a projection was put out there was the basis of a lot of the literature and a lot of the messaging around the election campaign, and it turns out to not quite be the. So it is perceived, and particularly if you listen to the opposition, it fuels a cynicism in politics.
Look, that was done, and the projection was not just me. There was Deutsche. There was others who projected. We were looking at very significant commencements. It is an imperfect science. Yeah. I look at the overall delivery. I think where we beat Sinn Féin in the last general election was not over 40,000. We did beat them on housing, particularly for first-time buyers, because I stood over the €30,000 grant. I stood over the First Home scheme. They tried to bring in some cracked leasehold arrangement and a two-tier.
This is where basically people wouldn't own the land.
Wouldn't own the land, and I went at them on that. But I also went at them on the fact they were going to remove €100,000 on average worth of support for first-time buyers. And I did a meeting the week before the election in the Grand Hotel in Malahide, had over 400 potential first-time buyers at it. What people want is solutions. Yeah. There's all the political noise and stuff, and maybe that's something that media and politics get caught up in, these big discussions around it. At the end of the day, when I'm talking to moms and dads and they have adult kids that are there, they want them to be able to buy a house. and we brought measures forward that was able to do it. I had every single initiative. If I look at cost rental, that was wrong. Okay, 6,000 people living and in cost rental units now, average 30% below market, state investing in that. They're tangible things that I can point to. And look, at the end of the day, some will have a view over one projection that we got wrong. I'm fine with that, to be honest with you.
And in terms of the, the fact that you're now out of housing, you can look back and say, right, if I'd had more time, I could have done more here or there. Where to you are still the biggest log jams in getting that delivery level that we need?
Even though I'm out of housing, we're still involved. Yeah. And I think that's one thing people need to, like, in fairness, across Cabinet, we're all involved in each other's department. And I sit on the Infrastructure Cabinet Committee. I talk to James Brown a lot, okay? I think it is moving. We saw the 36,000, the output last year. We saw the completion figures first quarter this year. Really, I have not yet seen the benefits fully of the planning reform, but if I see on Commission and Planal, now decisions are coming through much quicker. Okay, that is happening. People will say that across energy, across housing and that. So really what we need though is the one area is more development finance. I think that's the pinch point. I think there's lots of supports there. We're seeing housing move, but the state is the biggest investor.
Yeah.
You need to, at some stage,
are you talking about private money?
Yeah. You do need that. But we need to, like, the housing situation in Ireland is not normal still. Okay, it's not normal in most of Europe either, or in Canada or in Australia that others think about. The state's investing at a level we never have done before, and rightly so. Don't get me wrong, but I am thinking about, like, when we can get up to a level that whereby you're getting normal private investment coming in, where the state's still building at scale. Yes, LDA will get there. But I think that development finance for the smaller guy or girl who's building is still very tricky, and is still expensive. You're looking at 1% in, 9-10% during the course, 1% out, double digit, interest rates for them on development finance, which makes projects very difficult on the viability
the margins
front.
aren't there. Look.
And you don't want to be, even though the bigger PLCs have done really well, like Cairn and Glenveagh and others, and you see people like Ballymore back in, and that's good. Ivara and all that. That's great. But you also need an ecosystem of the SME guys and girls there. Yeah. You don't want to have a situation where you're overly dependent on a small number of bigger deliverers or bigger builders too, who are doing both commercial and resi as well. So that it is changing though. It is changing. I think, like, obviously rent is a real tricky one. That's one that, like, I brought in the eviction ban was brought in through COVID. It was still the right decision to end it. Yeah. It couldn't continue. Copped a lot of grief. You were asking about some of the more difficult times. That was because I did realise the decision I was taking.
Do you think the public wanted that ban to stay?
I think it's really hard to. Yeah, I think on balance, I think at the time, yes. Yeah. If I'm being honest, the majority. But I think a lot of people then understood really people couldn't get back into their own homes, and that you're not going to have a normal situation. That is improving, and is improving. But look, we all know rents are still too high. Okay, and supply is going to be key on that.
I do want to move on to energy, but one area I do want to talk to you about is the Dublin Airport saga that kind of rolled on. We wrote a lot about it last year. Really good. Really good.
I think it was pretty damn good too. Yeah,
But like this row with Kenny Jacobs and the chair Basil Kagan was obviously played out a lot in the media, and you very pointedly rejected a deal.
I did,
which would have seen Kenny Jacobs walk away with. There's a 960 figure, there's a 1.2 million figure. You might clarify that now, but one, you might explain again, why did you reject that figure, and two, was that not an implicit or explicit undermining of the chair at the time?
Well, firstly, I'm the shareholder, so I had no seat around the table, so I didn't have a vote. I think I can't say too much, but I can say a little bit more than I said at the time because I was conscious the negotiations were going on. I thought Kenny Jacobs in the main did a pretty good job. I think he was, I think anyone who dealt with him, he's a different style. Did he get everything right? No, he didn't. But then I look at DAA, and DAA are a really successful commercial semi-state.
They had a really good year last year.
Really good year, 66 million return to the Exchequer. They're really super people within there. But when you have a conflict between the executive and the board that can't be resolved between them, and that it just felt to me like, well, okay, we've agreed, so we're going to kick it up the line to, myself to just sign it off and ask no questions. That's not the space I'm in. Yeah. And it was more than just about the DAA. It was a principle that with commercial semi-states, so the choice was, if the board didn't believe that a person wasn't doing their job properly, well, then you terminate their contract. If that's not the case, well, then the other one is, so if they are doing a good job, they stay on.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but then it was
so you clearly, my taking from that is that you were clearly saying to the board, and not just Basil Gagan, get back in the room and figure a way out.
I did say that.
Yeah.
And I won't go into too much, but I did. I absolutely did. And I asked for that to be done.
Were you disappointed that it ultimately came to Kenny Jacobs leaving?
I think it was the best result for both.
Okay.
But the Exchequer, I'm conscious that I have to manage Exchequer monies too. Okay. And the idea that just after a short mediation period, that what I get up the line is just very simply
a huge
here's a huge pat. That was no reflection on Kenny, or I'm not saying but this seems to be the norm. So I'm saying, well, I don't want this for any agency. So if someone's not doing their job, terminate their contract. Do they get compensation, normal compensation under the contract? If they're doing their job well, leave them there. And if you can't manage that, well, then you've got to figure that out.
Do you accept that your decision to reject it will make the attracting of a new chief executive more difficult?
We've got a lot of interest in it, thankfully.
Do you?
It's a great organisation.
Okay.
Right? It really is. And I think, there always needs to be positive tension between the board and the executive. It's right that the board will hold an executive to account. As minister, I don't manage the day-to-day running. I'm the shareholder on behalf of the Irish people. There is a lot of good interest. We have a really good chairperson, and Gary Owens has been appointed. I think he'll do a super job. Yeah. Cork is growing. Dublin's growing. All of our airports, indeed. Shannon are growing too. But look, I stand over what I did there, because the Exchequer and the taxpayer can't just be a cash cow. That if there's a problem between an executive and a board, be that wherever, that okay, well, let's just pay them off. Yeah. And sometimes that'll be the right thing to do.
When do we expect the new chief executive to be appointed? Don't
have a timeline, but it's been advertised now, and there is very good interest in it. I think why I wanted to get a chairperson, Gary coming in as a chairperson, he'll take over from Basil very shortly, is that I'd like the chairperson to be involved in obviously the appointment of the CEO. I think that makes sense. Okay. It's a great airport and it's a great company. So
it's in your constituency as well.
It is that too, but it is. I know loads of people who work in it, but it's, to be fair, look, the team in there went through the ringer as well, to be frank. They didn't want all this happening. We got good people on the board too who are giving up their time for practically nothing. So I'm glad we've moved on from it and we want to get it right.
Yeah, fair enough. Though we did get great mileage out of journalistically.
I know, I can understand that. I was reading your stuff every week on it.
Talk to me about the energy bit, because that's obviously a huge part. And you said it's the big focus of your, we've heard a lot about offshore wind. We hear a lot of it not moving fast enough or what's happening with it. And we have this great potential area of growth off our western coast. Where are we? What's happening? Sure. What's your big agenda item on that front?
Big one first is, onshore first, and I will answer the offshore, but I think it's important to put it in context. We're the best in Europe at onshore renewables, and the very best in relation to integration into our grid. So we've doubled wind capacity in 10 years. Solar is absolutely going gangbusters now. 2015, we had 2 megawatts of solar. Now we've 2,400 megawatts and growing, not including, 1,000 megawatts on rooftops. So that renewables piece is really growing. Offshore, and particularly our East Coast schemes in the Southeast, the target was under previous administration that we'd have pretty much 5 gigawatts of offshore renewables integrated by 2030. That is not going to happen. My focus is on getting as many of them as possible into construction. Now, there's a reason for that, and this isn't just missing timelines or what we discussed earlier on. It was planning. They're the first major offshore projects. We only have one, Arklow Bank, and that's over 20 years old.
And is that due for obsolescon?
I think we'll look at repower. Repowering, we're going to have to look at there. So,
sorry, not to distract from your
no, you're fine. So that'll be repowered. So I've met all what's called the phase one developers. I meet them regularly, and they're all still on the pitch. And the big focus is now, I think a couple of them will come out of planning this year. I hope that they're not J-Ord. I hope people that have a real think about that. If they are, we'd hope for an early hearing date, but that we could get into construction in the next couple of years, that people will see steel in the sea.
And how long from, say, start of construction to delivery or plugging in?
Depends on the site, but you're looking at early 2030s. Which isn't bad. I'm projecting now, if we keep going with our onshore, where we're going, probably 68 to 70% of our electricity will be generated by renewables by the end of the decade, without offshore.
Okay.
Because I'm not banking on that offshore coming in. You may, with a really fair wind, if you excuse the pun, one of them might be connected by 2030, but I'm not banking on that.
And how much of this is the state having to get out of its own way, as we talked earlier on, about making this happen quickly or as quickly as it possibly can?
I think, to be fair to Commission Pleanála, they'll acknowledge there's been a lot of learnings in the first projects. I think we've seen now with the only successful auction in the European Union last year on Tonua. Only 2 in Europe altogether, the British one, AR7, and ours. So that, like, Ireland is seen as absolutely the place to do business. And we have 2-way CFDs. Our process is good. We've had failed auctions all the way across Europe. We're going to continue. We'll have the Liban auction. I'll make an announcement in the next few weeks. Again, that'll come out. So I want a regular auctions offshore. And what we're doing to underpin it, so we're building a pipeline, is that national DMAP. So mapping our national maritime territory. That work has started, and that'll be done by the end of next year. So, like, I attended the Wind Europe conference in Madrid a couple of weeks ago, and there's more than just major interest in Ireland. There's major investment coming to Ireland in this place. Why are the phase ones were hit with very significant requests for further information?
From Commission Pleanála.
Yeah, and that's fair enough. They're an independent, and mainly around bird surveys. Mainly, and I think there will, again, any new projects going in will go in under the new Planning Act that we passed. So I'd be confident we'll be able to get things through much quicker. There is still potential for more onshore renewables. That is happening. We have a good pipeline of wind and solar onshore, but offshore is going to be the game changer for us.
Most people, again, not discounting the environmental, because they're very real concerns.
Yes, of course.
Would want to see, we are an emergency. Why are we not seeing emergency powers utilised? Why are we not seeing the sort of get out of the way, we need to get this done approach being taken? Because there was a sort of an expectation that this government has talked all the right from a business post perspective, from my perspective. The agenda is good, the programme for government is really good, but what we're not seeing is that razor-like focus of, lads, the normal quibbling and moaning about this stuff, get out of the way, we need to just drive on.
Yeah, I think we are seeing that now. Okay, look, we can't rip up planning law. Okay, so leaving that aside, but in fairness, the work we've done on critical infrastructure bill this week, I'll actually sign the scale of fees, which is capping the cost for successful cases. Now, you can imagine that was very well received by the legal fraternity, but is actually looking at having a scale of fees and a capping of fees. And then Jack will be bringing in issues around jeopardy. It's perfectly right that people have access to justice, and we're not infringing on our house or that people will have. But the last place any planning decisions should be made, in my view, is in the courts. And we're moving away from that. We're seeing JORs actually reduce. And to be fair, as I said earlier on, we're seeing the courts respond by giving early dates in relation to judicial reviews. Take on the transport side. Like, I have now, Lewis Finglas is through, JOR mediated out.
What's that going to be funded for? Because I see local Green politicians. So I live up in that area. I live in Glasnevin. I see this isn't going to be funded for 2 or 3 years. Or what's the
actually originally in the speak to my former colleagues in the Greens who I like. I met a number of them in Dunleary earlier on today. You know, they're all right. But actually, under the previous minister's plan, Lewis Finglas wasn't due to start till the mid 2030s. I'm going to bring that forward to this decade. I think we can start that in the next 2 years, and we'll fund it. And Metrolink's going to start next year, in August, September next year. Lewis Finglas is a brilliant one. It's 3K off road. It'll serve about 58,000 homes there. It'll be a park and ride as well. It'll be integrating heavy rail with light rail as well at Broome Bridge. It's made for it, and I want to bring that forward. And I'm also going to bring forward, we've Dart Plus West and Dart Plus Southwest have started. We're doing the CPOs. We're doing the tender documents, and I want to bring Dart Plus Southwest forward for construction into this decade. So we're going to have major infrastructural projects under construction. We're going to see Metro, as I said, start next year.
One question about Metro.
But sorry, I'm kind of going off the point there a bit. But if we're getting back to it, your point was, is this a government that's going to get things done and get people, clear the path for it to be done? I think we're doing that now.
Okay.
And it's all about delivery. And I do think, to be fair, that the environment for that has actually changed too. That there's a lot of people out there saying, well, look, why is it taking us so long to deliver infrastructural projects? We do many of them on time and on budget. And I talked to colleagues in Europe. I was talking to one of my colleagues on the energy side who was bemoaning their own planning system as to why things are so delayed. Now, Europe has a big role in this too. And the point that you've made about saying, this is an energy crisis, we've the Middle East, we've had Ukraine. Who knows what we'll have next? From an EU perspective, have we been serious in actually doing things at an EU level that's going to make it easier for countries to deliver energy infrastructure? And that hasn't been done yet. And we've heard about the toolbox from President von der Leyen and the elements within it. We're still waiting for the energy elements within it. There's been some, and we've fed back into it and all that type of thing. The response has been, in my view, less than urgent. And we need to see that as well, because Europe will help us unlock, particularly on the, or can help us unlock, particularly in the delivery of energy infrastructure. Like, we've got to invest about 18 billion to 19 billion just over this 5-year period in our grid.
Yeah.
The grid needs it. We have things like the North-South interconnector that's consented in the south, is in the courts in the north. That's the most critical piece of energy infrastructure that this island needs. And we need to get started on it.
Yeah.
But we've had political bun fights on the ground. We've the main opposition party, Sinn Féin, and I will have a kick at them because they deserve it on this, north of the border saying they want it, south of the border saying we should have another review to put it underground. We've had 4 reviews. Review means delay.
We were talking about the connection when Pat Rabbitte was in government.
It's nuts, and it needs to be built. We're building Celtic. East-West is in place. I signed an MOU with Spain for another one to continental Europe, but the one on land, like we've the single electricity market in the Republic and the North, we need that interconnector under construction. We need to deliver it.
Sean Sweeney departed from the Metro project, and I think he had garnered a lot of positive praise for being the sort of straight-talking New Zealander. Does his departure mean that Metro is less likely to be delivered on the schedule that we're now all talking about?
No, it doesn't. And look, I knew Sean. I think he was appointed by Eamon. Really good appointments. He's done a super job to get it through planning and get a clean application. We did really good market engagement, which was going out to the market and making sure that people knew this is actually going to happen. Most critical thing we did was fund it. The first €2 billion behind it. We have a good project team. We're going to be appointing a new chief executive shortly. And I think Sean won't mind me saying this either, and he's done a real good job. The project's more than about one person.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, with the level of interest from the consortia, like we put out the first real tender then just in the last week or so, we will have significant bidders into that. And that's for the track, that's for, the MH500 tender. So it's broken up into 3. So no, we'll get started on this next year.
I'll declare my interest because I'll have a station at the bottom of my road.
Which is brilliant. Well, I will have one. But for the whole East Coast, it's going to be transformational.
Yeah.
Like, if you take Swords as a city, okay, Donabate, you look at the development there, rail link to the airport, put an integrated piece of transport infrastructure that will link with light rail, heavy rail, metro. And people understandably talk about the cost. It's an investment. And on a conservative basis, the most recent cost-benefit analysis that I've seen, and there'll be another one coming shortly, is it'll return €1.40 for every €1 invested. It'll be transformational from a societal perspective. It's not just a transport project. It's a housing project. It's a quality of life project. It's a electrification, decarbonisation project. And we're going to deliver it.
Okay. This question and that last bit I'm going to talk to you about has loomed large over this whole interview, and you know where I'm going on this one.
Not a clue. I was going to end it now.
No. Yeah. The Jim Gavin debacle has obviously brought focus on Micheál Martin's leadership. Your name is regularly associated with, as a possible successor to Micheál Martin, as is Jim O'Callaghan's, and belatedly even Darragh O'Leary's name.
I read your piece last week.
Super.
It's a good piece.
Good piece. Talk to me about your perspective on all of this. Is Micheál Martin's time now coming to an end, and do you want to be the leader of your party?
First, I think to go to the Jim Gavin presidential, I actually think, look, there's a lot of things need to be learned from that. I actually did the last canvass with Jim in Swords of Malahide, but it happened to be a really good canvass, a really decent guy, and said at the time personally, look, I'm glad things have moved on, but it wasn't our finest hour, no question about that. And I think that's something that did hurt, and fully get that. I've worked with Micheál since he became leader in 2011. I actually was obviously 2007 to 11 government. I have a really good working relationship with him, but a good personal relationship. I've never seen someone as committed, someone who worked so hard, someone who did transformational work really in relation to rebuilding the party. But I firmly believe this, Danny, particularly where we are at now as a country within Europe and what's happening in the world, it's now that you need the type of leadership that he is really, really good at.
But does he retain the confidence of your party?
Yeah, I think he does. Yeah. He does, and he certainly retains mine. He absolutely does. And look, I know over the last couple of weeks, in fairness, the 3 colleagues of mine, good people that I get on well with, okay, clever, intelligent, 2 brand new TDs. And we're a party that, to be fair, allows discussion and discourse. Sometimes,
are you saying that Albert Donald and James O'Connor haven't been dragged out and given the good kick?
Well, they haven't been waterboarded or anything like it. No. Well, they actually haven't. No. Like, to be fair, look.
I think that's one of the teasers there. I think we'll use.
Yeah. Okay, no, they haven't been, or anything else, by the way. No punishment has been meted out on them whatsoever, right? But it shows they care, right? But the party does care, right? And I think we just got to be mindful that, we're not that long after the last general election. I was there when people had written the party off, saying it's gone, it'll never be back, that Micheál will be the only Fianna Fáil leader that has never been Taoiseach, right? But we're not just in politics to be, for ourselves. We're never that. It's about advancing social and economic change in the country.
The reality is poll ratings at 16%. You're not getting re-elected on 16%.
But Danny, I've seen loads of polls, loads of times. I don't dismiss them. I read them.
Yeah. That
have always been wrong with regard to Fianna Fáil. I saw the exit poll, for God's sake, in the last general election that RTE kept going on about for 2 solid days, even though it was really clear.
Just to declare our last Red Sea poll on the
you
Wednesday,
you were good.
Was more accurate.
I know that you were, and I was going to get to that, but now you've stolen that compliment from me, so there you can't. No, but you know what? I'm not. Irish politics, constituency by constituency, the difference in support numbers is stark now, more than it's ever been. Right,
more fractured,
much more fractured, and even between parties. And I'm not saying politics has become personality based, but there's an element to that. So if I look at, let's say, certain within Dublin, like we've 10 TDs in Dublin now. When 2011 we'd 1, okay. But I look at the variance of the vote within that. Sometimes it's down to the party standing in an area, the level of work that's been done, those different types of things. But it always shows me that there's a way back. I'm not, to be really honest with you, I'm not overly concerned about a 16% in one poll or an 18% in another. Like we're 3.5+ years away from a general election, 3 years away from a local election. The last few locals were the largest party in local government, the largest in the Dáil. Look, my honest view is that, Micheál is absolutely the right man to lead the party right now. I understand, political speculation.
It's more than speculation, Darragh. He's 16 years as leader now, or 15 years as leader. There has to be a natural point of when his day is done, and it's natural enough for people in your own party and people like me in the media who will look and say, well, who's next?
Yeah, well, I get that. And I'm not going to look.
And you have skillfully avoided my question so far. So.
Well, I'm not going to speculate on that. I'll tell you why.
Okay, take Micheál Martin out of the picture. He's run off.
That's all hypothetical.
He's run over by a bus.
Yeah, but, well, God forbid, that's a bit extreme.
He's run over by a bus, or a vacancy comes for whatever reason. Would you see do you see yourself putting your name forward in that circuit? And that's not saying you're going for Micheál now. Or
I've always stayed away from hypotheticals, and I'm being really honest with you here. What I'm genuinely focused on is working as hard as I can over both the portfolios that I have and delivering the change that we need to deliver there and implementing the programme for government.
So let's take the hypothetical out of it. Do you have an ambition to be a leader of your party?
I'm happy to be a minister right now. I love the party that I'm in. I think we're 100 years in existence now. I think not without bumps in the road over that period of time, absolutely. But I think many of the transformative changes within this country, be that in relation to opening our economy up for FDI, free third level education, free second level, all of that type. That's
all great.
I'm proud.
Do you want to be leader of your party?
There is no vacancy right now.
I know there's no vacancy. That's not the question I asked.
And if that were to come up, I would actually obviously have a serious think about it at the time. But you see, Danny, you and I can stay here for. You can stay here for the next hour. I genuinely have never engaged in hypothetical speculation. I understand the interest in it. Look, I've been in this party since I was about 16.
Yeah.
Right, I love the party.
Do you think? Let me put it this way. Do you think the party should have a Dublin leader next time round?
Well, I'm a dub.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Okay, that's answered my. If he doesn't answer the question, he wouldn't answer. Darragh O'Brien, thank you very much for joining us here. Cheers. Welcome back to the Business Post podcast, Peter. That was good fun, wasn't it?
It was great fun.
Yeah.
No, it really was straight from the off.
Yeah.
You know, he didn't need any warming up. He was very frank. He seemed like he came willing to talk, and talk he did. There was a good mix of the pure politics, the policy, and a bit of the personal as well, which was good.
I thought, like, the area that I thought he might struggle a bit to answer was the kind of the 40,000, the failure in housing. And, you know, he kind of said, listen, if I got a projection wrong, I wasn't the only one to get a projection wrong, blah, blah, blah. But if I have to own it, I will. Like, you kind of go, well, listen, you know, I've already apologised. I can't apologise enough again. You know,
I suppose that, like that was interesting, and it was interesting to hear his rationale for it. And there's no super simple answer to, are you a success or a failure in a time of government in a department? He did focus very much on the 40,000 and the projection pre-election, which really is, you know, a matter of communications. And as you said, like, some people would have seen that as being misled, which he obviously rejected. The bigger point is, were you actually a success in moving the dial on housing? And personally speaking, I think that would be to be a little too kind.
Yeah.
Like, was there a seismic change in the country's housing situation in the 5 years? No. There's COVID, there's mitigating factors, there's planning, which in fairness...
They eventually brought in the Planning Act.
If you were to look at one marquee achievement that he had in his time, the Planning Act, I think, would be the one that you'd give him. And there's probably good reasons that, in my view, he wasn't a success in housing. But ultimately, I think that's where it falls. But I think interviews like this are actually helpful in that we learn more about those impediments. The stage gate one that cost 100 million for this, the planning impediments, the civil service. Some people might see that as passing the buck, and it ultimately does rest with the minister. But it does give you a slightly more nuanced view as to why maybe things are so slow, why ministers come and go, and housing or infrastructure, for instance, don't move. That was
kind of at the heart of my question of whether he is or not in control of his own department. Because again, you know, to the outside you say, well, hang on, you're one of 15 ministers at the cabinet table. You know, you're running the country, you're in various guys, you're making big decisions, signing off on major investment programs, all that kind of stuff. But yet at the end of the day, you're at the behest of civil servants, you're at the behest of people who are not elected, not accountable to anybody. You know, they're can operate in the shadows, etc., like that. I also thought from my perspective, you know, when he was getting into discussions around, you know, the use of, you know, obviously there are changes to the planning laws, and we've talked about the accelerating infrastructure report with Sean O'Driscoll, etc., that. But, you know, the use of judicial reviews and kind of like, like I called it, he said, like, should groups like An Taisce hurting the country, and essentially he says they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. They he spoke in a way that you don't normally get a government minister speaking. I was just going to say,
he spoke directly. He answered questions, which
is quite refreshing.
No, it's really refreshing, and I think the electorate and everybody else likes to hear the politicians.
So he's your local TD now, Peter.
He is my local TD.
How would you
that's
assess
right.
him now, kind of with that knowledge, and then I suppose with your kind of your work hat as well? Like,
yeah, I mean, like, I probably would have encountered Darragh most when he was in opposition housing, and always found him good to get on with, and like had a decent grasp of that portfolio from the opposition benches. As you say, he's my local TD. In that sense, you'd like to see him have success so that he brings more great stuff to North County Dublin. I've always kind of thought with Darragh O'Brien, I don't fully understand what he stands for. Like, take his predecessor in this department. I definitely knew what Eamon Ryan stood for.
Yeah.
You could disagree with a lot of it, or you could like it or not like it. But I don't get a full sense of what is his vision.
Yeah. A bit more, maybe. A bit more of this, a bit more of that. Like,
yeah, you know. And I think stuff like doing these sorts of longer form interviews are good ways for him to get it across. I have a better grasp of it now than I would have done. I like quite a lot of what I heard him talk about in terms of transport there and energy to a degree. But, like, do you get the sense that he's fully behind the renewables? He probably is, because there's a big opportunity there. But you had no doubt with Eamon Ryan, for instance, where he was. Now, the flip side of that is Eamon Ryan didn't deliver offshore wind either. When he was talking about the potential of offshore wind, he's right. but I found myself banging my head against the wall almost.
Less of an ideologue than Eamon Ryan is, and he's far more a pragmatic politician, I would think. So I think he's probably saying, right, how do I deliver any sort of win here over the next 5 years? Yeah, and what am I going to look back on?
Yeah,
I mean, things like Metro are beginning to move. You've got obviously DART extensions. You've got the Lewis to Finglas thing, which he said, which I thought was interesting. I mean, like local Green politicians say they're giving out because it's not going to start till 2028. But his view is, well, hang on, their minister didn't have it funded till after the 2030s. So, it's kind of, you can kind of say there's progress to be made. I would be of the view that there are failure to continue building out Lewis when we did the Cross City thing, even 4 or 5 kilometres a year.
Yeah.
Imagine what we would have after 10 years if we continue to do that.
I agree. Yeah. Like my sense is that all those projects that he discussed in the interview, if they can progress at the pace that he has set out that he thinks they will, at the end of his tenure in these departments, I think he'll have a lot more to point to than I personally think he does in housing. And I suppose you can only judge him on that. But he was making all the right noises about Metro, about DART Plus, about offshore wind. Yeah. Maybe his view of delivering that,
where he could make a real legacy for himself there. That's the one.
Whoever finally gets that over the line, it's a bit like, Bertie did great work for the Good Friday Agreement, but there was a lot done before him. Like whoever gets it over the line, gets all the credit. And there's such a huge opportunity there.
Massive, absolutely massive.
And like we've written quite a lot about it. I mean, he talks about the confidence with Metro. If we funded it, it gave confidence. Now it's moving on. Like you have to give confidence to the investors in the offshore wind space. And if they can't now progress it belatedly, then they're going to run into trouble again with investors.
And I would think, speaking purely politically, Jim O'Callaghan is seen as the leader in waiting or the most preferred candidate as of now. The name Darragh O'Leary is sort of, as we've reported in recent weeks, the name Darragh O'Leary has come into the mix, but O'Brien is definitely in that mix. And
what I thought was interesting there, and you'll have a better grasp of this maybe than I will. So we were talking about when he went back, or you were talking about when he went back with the Shannon campaign, and he was saying it against himself of, I didn't have any country relatives to point to. I was a Dub true and true for 5 or 6 generations. Like that still strikes me even in Ireland of 2026 that's a bit of an impediment to a future potential leader and potential Taoiseach. Everybody like Varadkar had his family in Waterford. Everybody is either one generation from or can point to the aunt or the uncle on the farm somewhere. He doesn't have it. Now, does Fianna Fáil need a Dublin leader maybe?
His greatest strength?
I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I would think that, it's a bit like Tony Blair trying to be Scottish. His greatest strength was that he was English. He was a Tory boy, in Labour clothes. That was his greatest strength. And that's how Labour were able to bridge that divide. I think Darragh O'Brien's greatest strength is that he's a true Dub. A bit like Bertie, you cannot hide the fact that you're a Dub. And I think there's a real zest within Fianna Fáil for a Dub to be the next leader, given it's rested in Cork for so long. But I do think there's probably also that rump who would want to see it go west as well. You know what I mean? That's why Darragh O'Leary's name has come into the mix. He's seen as the sort of standard bearer for that particular wing of the party. Like O'Brien cannot be discounted as a leader, notwithstanding his failure.
No, I don't think so,
and I think there's probably a cohort of people in Fianna Fáil who might say, yes, Jim, but maybe not. You know what I mean? Like you may be a 2 feet or 2 kind of high and mighty in terms of his legals and his Dublin 4-esque type persona. These things often can come down to just a general perception of someone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Can come down to, go back to when Leo Varadkar became leader. I mean, he won the parliamentary party, but he got absolutely trounced when it came to the local membership. They said, well, Simon Coveney's our man. And that overshadowed the entirety of Leo Varadkar's tenure as Taoiseach, given because he was never loved by rural Ireland. And the votes on 2020, kind of showed that,
And somebody like O'Brien, I think, would be more easily able to connect with people outside of Dublin than a Varadkar would have been.
Totally. Varadkar was hopeless, and by his own admission, he was hopeless at the press and the flesh thing. O'Brien is a very personable character. He's good at press and the flesh. He's a bit of a, I won't say, he's good with people. He's good in rooms. He can press the flesh, and I think that appeal can cross whatever rural-urban divide that there may be. But anyway, I just thought he was good value to get, not only on the policy front, but on the politics as well.
Yeah, no, he gave a really good insight into how government works. So
very good. Well, that was probably one of the longest ones we've done, but we will, I think it was well worth. So thank you for sticking with us. We'll be back next week, but for me, Daniel McConnell.
And me, Peter O'Dwyer.
That's it from the Business Post podcast. We'll see you next week.